the world that they're going to enter in terms of work, and there are ways to do that through accomplishment. And we need, as my book says, the world needs a new curriculum, because what we teach, the old math, English, science, social studies, which I call the mess, is really for an older time. We need a new curriculum for the current future.
Thank you, Mark. So I think for the time being, we're going to go into more in depth into each of these approaches, which are for really in-depth learning and quite innovative pathways. But each of our speakers can give you all a bit more feedback about how they work, proceed, and what is really essential in what they are looking for in the way they approach learning. And then we'll have a broader conversation also about the issues of ecosystem and you scale up these approaches. But François, would you be kindly start with your approach in interdisciplinary research and how you empower the learners?
Yeah, thank you. So if you look throughout the history at what are the best practices, or you see, for instance, the Socratic method, is something which we still remember a long time after. And if you look at the best places in the world of today, you will find universities such as those that are in the neighborhood here, and all of them starts from questions and research and learning through research. Okay? And so we are wondering whether we could adapt this to the younger learners. And actually, one of the researchers in the Bay Area in Berkeley has shown that we are all born scientists. So we have all the potential to use this capacity to question the world, to observe the world, to identify problems and to try to solve them, to obviously fail, but learn from their failures and eventually come up with ever better solutions that we can share, which is something that kids do spontaneously and something that scientists have to relearn to do because we sort of lost it along the way. So can we change this? So this could look somewhat utopian, and yet the youngest authors of scientific publications are 8 years old. So in fact, everybody can contribute to these sorts of knowledge, and it's not super Mozart type of kids. It's basically any kids, and initially it was happening only in families of scientists. So we went into one of the poorest neighborhoods in Paris, and we started to work with the kids of migrant families and very disfavored environments, and we showed that they could basically learn through research exactly the same way as these kids that were born in families of scientists. And so we basically are trying to say that this learning through research, these things that is happening in the best universities, is something which should be made available to everyone. And it's probably much easier to do today than a few years ago, because in all of our smartphones we have more computing power than the NASA used to go to the moon. Technology is not a limiting factor anymore. The access to previous knowledge is not limiting anymore. The access to networks of peers of all ages is not limiting anymore. And so we can really empower young learners to ask their own questions and contribute to the knowledge creation and not just be passive receiver of knowledge. And so the idea is that instead of assessing the kids on the solutions of yesterday's problems and yesterday's questions, we can empower them to ask new questions and redefine problems and be active contributors in finding some of the solutions that we all badly need, because the planet has a few challenges that you all know, but that the kids can tend to contribute to. And if you look back at the old universal, for instance, Aristotle was saying there is 3 forms of knowledge: episteme, which gave science; techne, which gave technology; and phronesis, which most people in the room probably don't know. Except, okay, thank you. And so phronesis is the ethics of action. Okay, and so if we want to have a balanced knowledge, we have to have episteme, techne, and phronesis taught simultaneously. Okay? And so we can engage the younger learner to think about not only the science and the technology, but also the ethics. And by the ethics, I mean not only the self versus the others, but also the short term versus the long term, and the local versus the global. And so we have to engage them in thinking about all these issues, and to think about them not in some sort of, there is right and wrong, but sort of a question mode where they would be questioning the practices of today and start inventing those of tomorrow. And so how do we engage the new generation in basically redefining the world that they want to contribute to build is something which we are really trying to do. And so we do this with very young kids, but we also do this with the university. So we are basically trying to hack university from inside, and we give diploma to students that want to change universities rather than be agents of conservatism, which is what has happened in most universities for hundreds of years. Because most universities are serving first the interest of the professors in the universities, then the interest maybe of powerful people around them. So it used to be kings, it used to be church, it used to it's small companies. I think in these environments there is lots of this. But how do you make sure the universities serve the bottom of the pyramid and not only the local people but also the global ones? So how do you engage university students in contributing to solve some of the world problems rather than competing with one another to pass stupid exams and enter into a rat race which is meaningless? So how do you create something which is both meaningful and fun, because you are going for challenges that are real-world challenges that maybe you won't completely solve by yourself because they are hard, but at least you would have contributed to redefine some of the problems and compile what exists and maybe create a small solution that by putting in the open source and the Creative Commons perspective, others can build upon to create something ever larger. So we started this in Paris, we are duplicating it in China with Tsinghua, we're duplicating it in Latin America and in many other places. So in this UNESCO chair, we invite university leaders, young faculty that want to make a change, and we train them to be this active agent of change so that their students can contribute to improve the global ecosystem. So to sum up that perspective, we call it Open Fiesta. So the Open Fiesta is the open faculty, because we want the faculty to be open to different disciplines, but also to society. The open faculty for open innovation, for open education, for open science, for open technology, for open arts, in the sense that you were saying, including all the humanities, to build an open society. So you go from, you build these open fiestas to where everyone can contribute to the global change.
Thank you very much, François. Léa, you're also on a quest, on a different way to engage learners, to make sure that plenty of learners who would drop out otherwise are going to be very motivated. You're also using technology, but in a different way, which is gaming. Can you tell us more about Quest to Learn and your approach?
Sure. So Quest to Learn, we use games on multiple levels. We use games as learning tools. Digital games, analog games. We design our own games as teachers, and they're both analog and digital, and games to assess learners, games to reinforce concepts that we've taught. So that's kind of one bucket, games as tools to use in the classroom. We also use games as a way to look at systems and to break down a game and say, okay, a game has rules, a game has challenges, a game has a space, a game has components, and each of those parts of the system interact, and then once we start to develop their understanding of games as a system, we can then use that and apply it to other realms of their education. Additionally, we look at games as something that is designed. We really believe in creating students who are design thinkers, which means students who are willing to prototype, iterate, try again, get feedback, give feedback, and work with each other to share solutions. So through games, we're able to do all that. And another realm that games and game structures are really important is the way that we design our curriculum. When a kid is playing a game and they fail at a level, they are determined to get through that level. They want to play again and play again and play again and keep on playing, even if they keep on failing. So why doesn't that happen in school? So we try to design our curriculum so that each unit of study is a mission that the students are going on. And on that mission, there is something that they need to know in order to accomplish their mission. The mission is generally a 10 to 12 week unit of study, and then within that mission there are smaller quests that they have to go on in order to unlock knowledge or unlock tools that will help them to accomplish the overall mission. For example, I'm a 6th grade science teacher, so I use a narrative every year to teach about the human body called Dr. Smalls. What happens is Dr. Smalls gets trapped in the human body. He's a good, well-meaning doctor, well-intentioned, but he's a little bit clumsy, and he put himself in the shrinking machine called the shrinkerator. He gets stuck in his patient's body. He wanted to find out what was wrong with what the mystery disease is that she has. He's trying to diagnose a disease. And in the shrinking process, he lost all of his medical vocabulary. So my 6th graders get very, very engaged by this idea of needing to help Dr. Smalls learn his medical vocabulary back. So the need to know that we create for them is what are the different systems within the human body? Where should Dr. Smalls go next to look for clues about the mystery illness? And so in that way, the whole 12-week unit of study is a game that they're playing, and each level needs to be unlocked before they can get to the next one. So that's one way that we engage learners and get them ready to be a part of this collaborative and system thinking and problem solving graduate that we're looking for in our school.
And therefore, how many years has Quest to Learn been already going on, and what are the results? It seems that the kids are really motivated and doing well now.
Yeah, so we are growing from 6 to 12, and we are currently at grade 11. I've been at the school for 5 years. It's been in existence for 6 years total.
Thank you very much, Leah. I think I'm going to disrupt a little bit the order and jump to Georgette, because I think STEAM has connection both to the Quest to Learn approach and to what a direct connection to also the science and art approach. So if you want to tell us about your work, Georgette.
So as I said earlier, I've developed a framework for educating so that people in the business world, people who teach individual subjects, and the community all have a common language by which to talk. There's too much of a disconnect, even among educators, on what it is. And I started in on the STEM field since its inception. I have a degree in integrated STEM education, and to me, the humanities was missing. We cannot just give students more science and math classes and add in IT technology and hope that they're going to be great researchers and mathematicians and engineers. We need to connect it to the humanity. What does it mean to you? So this is a graphic that I'm known for, and so it has the STEM courses, but it has the arts, which is where your ethics falls into, and your humanity and how it connects. We're all passionate about what we do because we have connected on a human level to being passionate. So I take this pyramid and I flip it over, and I say, this is your point. We are all holistic learners, and we learn thematically. But when we get to school, we separate it out, and we disconnect that knowledge, and then we don't have transference. And then this is the business level. So if you look under technology, at this conference, I'm hearing technology, and the way it's being used here is one very small fraction of technology. Technology is, the most important piece of technology ever developed was the pencil. Okay, we've done more with the pencil than we've done with all of the IT, ET technology that we have. So my schools definitely have IT technology, but they also have the tangible technology of the games, of doing biological studies, and the connection point between. So I'm known for this sentence of science is what is in nature, technology is everything developed by humans, engineering is a creative, interpretive act of using science and technology to go forward, and the arts is how it's accepted. Not just what it looks like, but what is it going to do for society? Is it sustainable or not? And then everything breaks down to a basic language of mathematics. And you can't lie with math. Math is the underlying language. So when you connect those subjects together in a way that is meaningful, that relates to the themes that we know exist in the world, and the students see that, then we create, I have a network of educators. And they create lesson plans and buy into the network, and that they are the experts in the field, and we empower the educators to be the leaders. We get the administrators on board through the communities and businesses that act, because our students connect to real businesses, and the businesses help with the political power of the policymakers and the decision makers to be change-effective agents. And we need to have passionate learning again. And people are afraid to use the word passion in education. But we're all passionate about what we do, but we're afraid to really let our children be openly passionate. And that's something we need to get back into education because they don't want to go to school anymore. They don't want to be lifelong learners. And so I tell you, we build more synapses across the board on the way up. We can keep our bodies alive forever, but our brains are the ones that need to be cultivated. You build more synapses on the way up, you lose less steam on the way back down. So our bodies last longer. And just want to mention a couple things in closing. Is that the network that I'm seeing being created is just unbelievable to me. That many people have heard of maker spaces, where you go and you see young people working with seasoned professionals, working with people who don't know anything about robotics but have something to add ethically or something to add in programming-wise, and they come together and they all respect each other. So my schools are like that. We don't just bring in doctors and lawyers to talk about that's what our kids should be. We bring in auto mechanics because an auto mechanic has to know about all the different types of cars, whereas somebody who is a car designer for one company just knows about those. So it's creating a whole network of people and a global community to be moving us forward. And so a lot of people have heard of PBLs, problem-based learning. I've taken it to the next level, reality-based learning. My students do real science. They blow things up to study chemistry. They do discoveries. They, in their PE classes, learn about trajectory and physics through action. That's where the passion comes from. And you can't stop my students from learning. I just have to throw my students out of my classroom at 8 o'clock at night. They wouldn't leave. I made them dinner. So I was a high school teacher. I've been a fashion designer. I've been an architect. And you just see the passion in those fields. And then I got into teaching, and I started to see the passion in the people I worked with, and then the students started to dwindle. And we can't let this happen.
Thanks a lot, Georgette. Jason, we were having a conversation yesterday evening about some other ways to fire the passion of your learners, and about action also, because you're going on the ground in different places. So please tell us about another way to engage with passionate learners.
Sure, thank you, Olivier. So my work has always been with adult learners, not so much in the K through 12 realm. And in that context, my trajectory has come really from being about governmental laws to more natural laws. I began my career as a lawyer. My professional career was venture capital, merger acquisition, strategic alliances, lawyer right across the street here in Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road. And what I noticed in the process of doing deal work with my clients was that often they would come several months later, we'd have a very contentious negotiation. They would come back, I'd say, how did that deal go? What happened? I'd spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with a team of lawyers going through and building up this platform for them to be able to execute a successful alliance. And they would come back and say, you know, in reality, it didn't really go very far. And you ask some of the questions why that's the case, and I began noticing in my own career a desire to put things together and noticing that wasn't happening. And I wanted to know, why are these deals not successful? And learned that there was some research out there back in the late 90s, early 2000s about why deals fail. And what they discovered was that there were 3 hard factors and 3 soft factors. The hard factors were things like synergy in the market, having a plan to do the integration, say, between 2 companies, and also looking at due diligence, the legal and financial elements. Then you moved into the soft factors, and it was elements like the team, the cohesiveness of the team, communication both internally and outside, and the culture of these organizations. But what was most interesting to me at that time was recognizing and hearing through this study of, I think, 1,000 different deals cross-border, that in the upwards of 83% of deals that had no financial value for the companies that were doing them, they found one critical factor. You needed to have all 3 of the soft skills present in the deal, and you could be missing one of the hard skills. You could be missing legal due diligence, and you could still have a successful deal. So I began to question, what am I really doing here? What value am I bringing? And look at all the value that's being missed in this design process through which the lawyers are negotiating. And I also see, too, the human toll of that. You'd watch these companies go through financing events and other situations, and there would be such a level of conflict that the relationship would completely drop into this deficit category. And you go for months like that. There would not be collaboration or innovation. You were stuck in this conflict. And I could see the pain that that was causing, both from the investor's perspective and the founder's perspective. And so it gave me the impetus to question, how can I best serve? And at that moment, really taking this ecosystemic lifelong learning in my own hands, I needed to curate somehow knowledge that would help me be able to work with this. And that took me into a deeper exploration of a number of different fields, transformative learning, interpersonal neurobiology, stage development theory, ego development theory as applied to individuals and organizations, and lastly, expressive arts inquiry. And that was sort of the external work. And then I realized there was this internal work as well that I need to do, and understanding what's the ground on which I stand when I'm doing the seeking. And that led me to really understand more deeply this process of deal making and social innovation, and that we've got this inner realm that nobody can see, this part of us, the subjective part that goes home feeling badly when we're in the midst of conflict, or that feeling excited when we can talk about something we care about and have it be witnessed by others. We have that inner realm that no one can really understand fully. We also have this outer realm where we relate to people and we are engaged in this chorus of possibility in our relationships. But then something comes out of those two when they mix together. And that's the third thing that I find people wanting to capture in the context of social innovation. And what we're looking for when we're funding companies, when we're building ideas, we're looking to harness that third living thing that exists in the combination of those two. And so what I found was that it was equally important to be skillful in our relationships and our building, but also coming from knowing the ground on which we're standing. That inner realm becomes equally important if we're to put these together and really capture the creative impetus of bringing people together. Along the same token, I could begin to notice with my students, as young law students, how difficult it was for them to be able to engage in conflict itself. There was such an externalization, wanting to do good work in the world and set themselves out to be agents of change, but neglecting to understand that there was a lot of conflict that you deal with as a lawyer, and the system is not set up to be changed. And what's that experience like? I remember having a student sit there after reading all the materials of Berkeley students, talking about the creme de la creme in the sense of sort of the elite institutional system. And she said to me, I'm not asking for more in this negotiation because, who am I really to ask for more? And that was the question. Who am I to ask for more? And so how can we not bring a deeper dimension into the quality of the work we're doing? So that led me to ask the question, what can we bring into an environment like Berkeley? An environment where I can't find a room on campus that doesn't have fixed furniture that face me. I don't have the space to be able to sit collaboratively with students, a level playing field, if you will. So we had to create a space in the conference room. And we began to work with different modalities to say, let's really deconstruct the patterns of our understanding around conflict. Let's begin to look at the deeper dimensions. How is this really affecting us, and where are we standing when we're in the midst of conflict? And so I developed, through this exploration of these various fields, ways of being able to engage with my students that are more about the embodied experience of their own learning, using somatic work and kinesthetic work. We also do expressive arts together. I actually have a final project where the students are looking at their identity in the nature of conflict and how that has changed. And I could have students tracking their development and watching themselves grow, watching their identities be in this liminal space, being suspended, and watching how that actually can shape through their own volition, their own capacity to know through the making of self. And that really speaks to me in the context of this work, getting to what is humanistic about the education. Can we recapture our confidence in knowing through making? And how can we do that in different spaces? Doing it in Berkeley is one context. I can do it in organizations. I was working with OECD 2 years ago to develop a new internal protocol with respect to conflict, to see how can we develop this type of collaborative relationship between us that's just beyond the cognitive. And then lastly, how do we bring this into other informal spaces? And so looking, say, systemically at conflict, looking at situations involving people in post-conflict regions. How can we introduce a more fully embodied experience of conflict? Ironically, many of those displaced populations are better at tapping into their embodied knowledge and tapping into artistic creation and breaking into song and connecting with ancestors and looking at the full experience of what it means to be human in the nature of conflict. I think there's a lot that we can learn in that context.
Thank you, Jason, and we'll come back to how do we spread this kind of innovation. I think we've had a lot of real-world learning approaches and different ones and very in-depth ones, but you still have some difficulties with learning, so you're the last one to speak, and maybe you can tell us more about your production.
Thank you. One of the things that I appreciate about this conference and what we've been doing is that we've been talking about people who are from the youngest all the way to the oldest. My focus has been more on the K-12 people and on the young people. And one of the things that I observe, there are three huge underestimations that I see in the world. One, we really underestimate what young people can do, especially today. We totally don't give them the credit that they deserve. Second, we underestimate how much technology can help them accomplish the things that they can accomplish. And third, I think we really don't appreciate how much an education can help them get there. And so the reason I have focused and tried to go past the idea of learning to something else is because our kids really need some goals to think about. And they don't have to be specific goals like I want to be an engineer, or I want to be a scientist, or I want to be a doctor. But they really need to be, I want to be an effective thinker, I want to be somebody who is effective at action, who's effective at relating to other people and to the world, and especially who's effective at accomplishing. And one of the things that I would really like to see is much more accomplishment-based education, and not achievement-based, but accomplishment-based in the real world, along the lines that Georgia was talking about, and along the lines that I guess everybody's talking about. I think we can connect kids to not just real-world problems, and that this is us, we're doing some research, but to things that companies need. There are websites, there are incredible infrastructure things, and that school-age kids are capable of accomplishing. We heard, you told me about some in Haiti, where the kids restored the traffic lights, where the kids put in the infrastructure for messaging. I've heard of 6th grade classes being hired to do consulting reports that they normally, in the past, hired consulting firms to do. But the 6th graders could do them equally well. The kids can build robots. So we need to, what I'm really interested in is figuring out a system to help every kid understand who he or she is in terms of their strengths, in terms of their weaknesses, in terms of their passions, what they're interested in, where they see the problems in the world, what they think they can do and would like to do, and then figure out a way to connect that with people who need things done, so that our kids don't think of themselves as people who go to school and then they go out and accomplish. No, the whole process of school and education is one learning to accomplish things that make the world a better place. And so I see this accomplishment-based education, and I see that one of the things that I also liked a lot in hearing everybody is that everybody's thinking now beyond the mess, right? The mess is the math, science, math, English, science, social studies. We want to do it better if we can, but we all know that we need to go beyond it. And we don't have a clear consensus yet on what that will be. I say it's effective action, effective thinking, effective action, effective relationships, effective accomplishment. Others put it differently. But we all know that we have to go beyond, we have to make better connections to the real world, and we have to give more value to our young people. And I think that the most frustrating thing to me in all of these conferences that I go to, whether it's this one or anyone in education, is how much you see white hair and how little you see people who are under the age of 20 or under the age of 15, and usually you don't see them at all. Or no hair, right? White hair and no hair. Right next to each other. But the point is that if we don't involve our young people in the conversation about their future, particularly in this age when they are so empowered in ways that kids never have been empowered like the kids of today, as Francois what other people have said. If we don't involve them in these discussions and figure out how to do that, we are not going to be able to design an educational system by ourselves that will be effective for them.
Thank you, Mark. We'll have another round of quick intervention, but maybe a little at a later stage on issues and what you really have on your mind and the issues about challenges about ecosystems. But I think it's time to invite the young and less young crowd in the room to ask a candid question or see how do you react, have you been inspired by the interventions. And I would like to take 3 or 4 questions in a row, so short questions please, real questions, and then we can have the speakers answer them.
Very fascinating talk, really enjoyed it. So here is one dimension that's missing in all your out-of-box thinking, and that's about the quality of teachers. Because we talk about students, we talk about technology, we talk about all the like your accomplishment, but the teachers, unless we address that problem, I don't know where we headed. Okay, so could you comment on that, please?
Thank you very much. We'll take 3 or 4 questions, and before we will do this, and then you can tell us. You want to already say? No, yeah, okay.
I would like to draw. I mean, there was the saying that it's about technology, but I'm a little bit confused because the technology is a tool, of course. We saw it also with the former panel. But I guess technology is changing our society very quickly, very quickly. And the future society will have much more tools in the society which will completely and drastically change what we need to learn. And I hear some saying here about what we need to learn, because I hear you problem solvers and I hear peacemakers and so on. But I'm a little bit scared that, if all the billions of us will be taught, like you were saying, to that billion, in the same role, and I'm a little bit confused about the future society, how this socio-economic will work, and whether it's true that we only need people, like you were saying, educated like this. We had some discussions here before this in our own groups of the future global education.
Victor, can you please precise what is your question to be
to how does it relate to the future society with much more capabilities technologically than we have now, and we learn these kind of things that you're saying, and do we really need a society with these kind of people, or do we need just to learn a lot of them just to have happy lives in their own way, and not to be too much directing how they should be, like they should be problem solvers or whatever. They may be very unhappy if they are all like you were telling.
Thank you for the second question. We'll take the first one and then we'll start answering the questions.
Thank you very much. I'm Christina, also from GEF. Just trying to kind of look from a different perspective of the box, as we are all gathered for the Global Education Futures Forum. My question is how global actually this new type of out-of-box education would be. Because as you can see, most of us here are the representatives of the so-called, I'm very bad with that, but the so-called Western civilization. I'm very sorry about that. But how can we ensure that there would be no dominance over one particular cultural pattern or civilizational pattern over that new kind of global cutting-edge education out of the box? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I guess we have a first round of answers. Who would like to answer the question about the teachers and the importance of training teachers? François, please go ahead.
So I completely agree with you. I think that's rate limiting. Most countries don't have a good lifelong learning experience for teachers. Initial training is already very obsolete in most places. So this is definitely a major issue. And we have a stock of millions of teachers. Some of them are really dedicated, but have not been trained in other ways. I mean, they've been trained in the 19th century mode, and so they have a hard time with 21st century kids and world. So this is very true. Yet we know of many different solutions that are happening in different places. You have got some here. Many organizations have spotted the most interesting innovation in education. What we could do is take advantage of one more fact that probably you know about MOOCs and the Massive Online Open Course. What's interesting is that MIT just published a study showing that teachers love MOOCs, and they are among the most motivated attendant students of the MOOCs. So if we could build international, to take the cultural diversity perspective, international best practices of education and make it available in all possible languages through drug translation and the like, we could invite the teachers of the world to learn about the best experiences, comment on their own practices, because maybe they've adapted this Confucian practice in the West, or this Socratic technology in Singapore, and you can try to see how they are doing this, and you can progressively do not promote one solution, but offer many different alternatives and let them choose what works best for them and for the kids that they have a responsibility for. And one more word I would say is that if you look internationally by the countries that do have better results, it's typically countries where the teachers, when they see a kid with a problem, they are solution seekers, they are researchers of solutions, they are trying to look for what already exists, what they could do, they attempt things, and eventually they adapt it for the single kid that has this problem. So I think we can contribute to this ecosystem of teaching, where every time a teacher has solved one particular problem, they can share their solution so that other teachers can use it and adapt it to their local conditions.
François, thanks a lot. I think both Georgette and Mark would like to add something on teacher, all of you, but so quickly, yeah.
I train teachers for a living, and I work nationally in 35 states, and I work internationally. For instance, the entire nation of South Korea runs on my platform. So I look at massive discrepancies between teachers. Even in the United States, there's some states that their teachers are so underprepared to teach. And I've created a network of a collective teaching unit where I have people globally all feeding in, but they have a common language by which to talk to each other. So the network of teachers are developing each other, but there's still insight from business, from policy, from administrations, and from educational leadership experts. So I think it's about cultivating a global network to not necessarily level the playing field, but have them each put their own passions of the playing field in, because I can't teach about Moscow the way they can teach about Moscow. So for our international educators to be creating a network, I think is critical.
Thank you, Georgette.
And I would say, I love good teachers, and the best teacher that I know is Esther, who spoke yesterday at this thing. And she is a teacher who does no instruction. And there's such a changing role, but what she does emphasize, and what the best teachers have always emphasized, respect, empathy, motivation, passion, bringing out the passion in the kids. And I think we're going to go through a huge change in the world. We are going through a huge change. From the idea that teachers do instruction, that they teach content, that's to the idea that the teacher becomes the coach and the mentor as students individualize their programs and go forward, and the teacher is that lovely hand on the shoulder that you're going to remember for the rest of your life. I think that's a huge change. It's going to be a very long time before it works itself out, but that's what we're going to see in the future.
And also as a learner, teacher as a learner.
Yeah. Jason, you want to add something on this too?
Yes, and it's sort of relating to the other areas as well. For me, the notion of having communities of inquiry and changing the way that we teach from looking for the period, or maybe in the law school, the exclamation point, and moving with the comma, and being able to sit in the comma, and being able to sit in the uncertainty when we look at the complexity of the issues that people are facing in the world. At least the adults that I'm working with are facing big issues. There's no simple lever, there's no cause and effect. There is something that will happen when you do something, and you don't know what it is until later, if you can see it. It's complexity, right? So how can we begin to sustain the patience, to sit in that inquiry and observe what's actually happening? And what I've noticed in my own practice is having the camaraderie, the support, the encouragement, the soft place to fall, if you will, the friendship with others who are doing similar work. And whether we orient around the purpose of being educators at Berkeley to teach law students, or we align ourselves as peace builders cross-continentally, looking to see what tools, what operating systems can we infuse into local communities that will give them the support that they need. I think in part what we need are these intercircular communities of inquiry, these places where we can just examine these questions. My experience in academia, as well as in the world generally, is we've developed such a high bias toward cognition. We have a lot of people highly cognitively developed that are, it's like a cumbersome column, we don't have much range to move. And giving teachers the permission to do that, giving teachers the permission to bring their full self to work. There's excellent research now in social neuroscience in the classroom, and looking at how attachment theory relates to how students show up. You have disadvantaged students who've experienced shame and isolation, and we bring them into other classroom environments where that's what's continuing. As simple as a teacher showing an interest in a different way, being able to create that secure attachment through the classroom experience can be the defining factor. And I think we need to really understand what is it that is going to elevate and accelerate the potential of the students. And it might not be something related to cognition on a test. Yeah, it's how they can show up in the room.
So there's indeed a huge challenge about teachers training and what can be done. I would like to just link what's been said just now to the international dimension and to the Western bias. François, yesterday we were talking about wisdom and how do we manage for kids to adults to share different approaches to wisdom. I don't know if you want to contribute to the answer to the question. But
Yeah, I think traditionally, so wisdom is usually not even part of the curriculum. Okay? And yet all of us are at some point in our life in need of some sort of wisdom, and then we look for whatever is available locally. Actually, Confucius was saying something interesting about wisdom. He said there's 3 ways of getting there. One way is to have lots of failures and learn from your failures, but you're likely to be bitter at the end. The other one is to try to think very hard about this, but this is very noble but very hard. The third way is to imitate the wisest people around you. The problem is that those that claim to be the wisest people around you are probably not the wisest people around you. Okay? So we have this sort of a complicated situation, and yet, so how can we build something that would be some sort of open source wisdom, where instead of having only one definition of wisdom, and if you modify 1 comma, you're going to be punished for it. You could use all sorts of solutions that come from different parts of the world. They could come from your little sister, or from your grandmother, or from someone at the other side of the planet. Because you could share this collective wisdom, and we could progressively build it as individuals, as collectives, and as civilization, and even start to think about how do we put this into the machines. Because one of the major problems for tomorrow's future, and I'm just trying to address part of your point, is machines are going to be ever more powerful. Some people predict, among which lots of technologists, including some living in this area, saying some of it will be smarter than we are. Okay, and maybe it will take over the world, and maybe it won't need us. And if we look at the way we treat lower form of intelligence, or what we call lower form of intelligence, this upper form of intelligence, is it going to treat us the way we treat chimpanzees and mice? In which case we will have a problem. So we have to start thinking about tomorrow's questions like this, and invite everyone in. So I think one of the exercises we want to start to offer to kids is to write a letter to the future intelligences. So that's themselves, because they will be part of the future intelligence, but that's collective, and that's maybe machines. What would you say to tomorrow's intelligence? I think all of us can ask ourselves that question, but we can ask it collectively, and we can certainly engage the new generation in starting to think about these issues.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, François, for this perspective. Do we have more questions in the room? Other people? So please, Georgia, do answer, but I can see, yeah.
I just wanted to quickly answer the technology question. I have this phrase that I've coined, functional literacy, that things should be fun, to be engaging, but be functional. Because when we think of literacy, we think of language literacy. But we want our children to be technologically literate, we want them to be mathematically literate, and collectively, technology should be a spectrum across the board. You shouldn't go to a technology class. It should be something that we recognize the use of it, whether it's the pencil or the digital technology, across the spectrum of the subjects. So I think as technology grows and expands, we have to not forget the base levels of technologies that have made those technologies, and collectively we're looking at a functional literacy.
I mentioned Georgette. I see a question.
Yes.
Yes, Stéphane.
Stéphane Vincent, OECD. I wanted to make first a comment on the fact that many of the things that you've said, I would say that most teachers would agree with them. We have a teacher in learning international setting, and it's clear that most teachers do not see themselves nowadays as content transmitters. They would agree with what you are saying in many ways. So, one question is, second point is that teaching and education is a very multifaceted phenomenon. So you're saying yourself, that what we need is not my model alone, but a little bit of this and that, and so to make sure that the learners get what they want. But that makes it a very challenging task. So at the end of the day, if I'm an external observer, how do I know that actually you're delivering the right education? Because if it's a little bit of everything, and if, what does it really look like, and if you don't relate it to the outcome, which is basically, I want someone who is interested, happy, and with learning. So,
right. So I don't know if many have a question, but there's one more here, and then this is a time to wrap up, in fact, and I think answering partly this question will be about the how do you scale this, which is one part of this question we had for today, but lack of time maybe. We'll listen to your question.
My name is David Goldsmith. My quick statement, innovators are very passionate, and all of you are very passionate. I'm checking your bios online, and we can hear it. You're also driven. But innovators also have the ability to abandon ideas very quickly and also say, I don't know. In the context of yesterday's meeting for GEF, I sat in, and everybody seemed to want to one-up each other. Love, hatred, rage, if you were there. Everybody wanted to be a little bit better. My question is, how much are you willing to give up your passion for your ideas that you think are correct for somebody else's in an environment like this to actually create change? Because I don't do it.
Thank you.
I can give one example, and this is going to be an interesting back and forth perhaps with the games. 10 years ago, or almost 15 years ago, I thought games were going to be the answer to the world and to education, because they had all the engagement, none of the content. Schools had all the content, none of the engagement. And I literally had to abandon that when I saw how little progress was made in doing this. And we have evidence that some progress has been made, obviously, in a school here and some things there, but the games just didn't emerge. And the reason I concluded was that they were too hard to make. And so, therefore, it's time to move on and think of what the next issue is. And I concluded that what we teach is really something we better look at a lot more carefully than we have.
Leah, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gamer, but I got this job at this school and I got on board. I was like, this is working for these students in this particular ecosystem at this institution. But the deeper stuff that I was speaking to earlier about what they're getting out of it, the systems thinking, the problem solving, the collaboration, I feel like that's the common thread that we're all talking about, the kind of adults we want in our society. So I'm here now doing game-based learning, but I'm open to STEAM, I'm open to all sorts of ideas, whatever it takes.
So one of my teachers who's a pioneer really in the field of adult developmental psychology puts it this way, quite simply, we're all bozos on the same bus. And in the sense of, even looking around the room yesterday, I was remarking with someone or hearing some comments about how we are all coming from so many different perspectives. We can read about each other and see the bios, and then we come in the room and we're like just a bunch of people who care about the students in our class, who feel the outrage at what happens in the system. Like, there is an element that brings us right back to a shared common sensation, feeling, and I believe that's a really important part of this, just to bring it back to our common humanity in a sense. It's not about the papers or the subjects we've written on or the density of the knowledge, but being able to come back to the sense of belonging, what it's like to be alienated, what it's like to feel isolated in society. Those are key themes that we can all understand and experience, however different the magnitude may be. I think that's one of the challenges for us, to let go of those higher dimensions and just come back to our shared humanity.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm passionate and attached to STEAM education, but I very much set up a structure that there was no design. I looked at what was being done collectively at universities around the world, and it manifested. And I specifically developed a company that I get numerous perspectives, and it's an evolving framework, because no one educational system that gets developed by anybody is necessarily going to work in 10 years. So I try to create a framework that does evolve, and I am incredibly open to having it change and evolve, and it has in that process.
François, may I add to answer Stefan's, as a concluding remark to answer Stefan's important question also?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and clearly it's easier to assess the classical way. And so, yet I think if we want to reinvent the system, we also have to reinvent the way we assess. I think, one of the problems of the classical system is that it's sort of unidimensional in the assessment. And so you optimize for whatever is being assessed, but sometimes, too often, it's at the cost of minimizing other dimensions. And I think that's one of the problems. So we have to invent multi-dimensional ways of assessment that are maybe more real world, more peer, more society, having a look at the portfolio rather than, and so everybody could have a different portfolio. And this way, rather than forcing everyone into one box, you allow everyone to think out of the box and to create out of the box. And you assess maybe what's common then, it's the meta skills rather than the personal trajectory, because they're going to all be different. But you could look at the meta skills, the ability for the people to have passion, their ability to be critical thinker, their ability to accept criticism, their ability to change and to take into account the other perspective, their ability to have empathy for the others, and so on. And I think what we have to assess them for is not so much what machines can do better than we can, but things that are typically human, because I think that's also addressing the sort of future society and future market. If the only thing you can do is things machines can do better, you have a problem. And currently, most education system is made so that machines can evaluate it, therefore machines could do better. Okay? So that system can, by definition, not work for the future.
Thank you very much for this closing remark. Thank you. Thank you for the speakers.
Thank you very much. And now we're off to lunch. So this is probably the most exciting time because everybody was waiting to go.